This podcast is supported by the Newman School at the Talmud Torah of St. Paul, where academic excellence and Jewish values meet, teaching analytical and critical thinking skills that are necessary to thrive in a complex world. Now enrolling grades K through 5. Learn more at ttsp.org/Newman. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TCG Folk. This week, I got to talk with Minnesota Vikings kicker Greg Joseph. We talked about his participation on the JCRC's trip to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., being part of a Jewish community despite the transient nature of being an NFL player, and how he went from kicking soccer balls to footballs on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Greg Joseph, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you and I got to meet a couple of weeks ago. We chatted a bit at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum as part of the JCRC's annual trip. Back on now after the COVID hiatus. You've had a couple of weeks to sort of take it in and reflect, I guess, on everything that you saw there. And I was walking with you for a bit, and you were very dialed in. You were reading everything. Your mom was with you. She made the trip up with you from Florida, and even she had commented. She's like, "Oh yeah, he could be here for days reading every word." As you've had this time now to let it sink in, how does it all sit with you now after this time to reflect?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I want to thank the JCRC, the Vikings, and the Wilfs for giving me the opportunity to be there with my mom. As soon as I, heard of it, I was in, and I knew I was in. The Vikings knew I'd be in right away. So very thankful for that to everyone and appreciative for allowing me to be there. But yeah, now that it's had a couple weeks to, that I've had to sit with it, it just makes me realize how important it really is, how important it is that we don't forget. And I give a huge amount of credit to all of the teachers, educators, students, service members that came from Minnesota that went to DC to learn and to better help, teach future generations or peers or students about the importance of not just this Holocaust, but any, Holocaust that has happened, because if we don't recognize history, the possibility of it happening could be very real. So now that that it's had a chance to sit in, I'd been there once before, but I was young. So I was excited to see how, in a grown-up perspective now, I would look at it and what I would take away and what, differences I would, learn. It's heavy stuff. As you referred to, I think I was the last person in the group. I tried to read as much as I possibly could, and I always do until I just can't read anymore. It's the little details are what get to me the most. About the little towns and the little things people did or didn't do to help, the Jewish people, and it was more so than just the Jewish people, as it was African Americans, gypsies, disabled people. Political prisoners. So, 6 million Jews, but 11 million total. So it's, one of the most evil things in history to happen, period. And I'm just glad that people are taking the time to learn about it, to recognize it while we still have survivors in this world and letting it impact them at a human level.
You really, in talking to you a couple weeks ago and hearing you now, you are, for if people missed the article that we ran right after the trip, you're the son of an educator. Your mom is the dean of students at the day school in Boca Raton, Florida. How much of it do you think the way you sort of talked about it and looked at it in the moment comes from being the son of an educator?
I think the way I look at it and talked about it, it definitely has to do with being the son of an educator, but it has to do with how amazingly well Donna Klein curated our education as young students, because we started learning about it in seventh and eighth grade, and how amazingly they curated it. So to a level that 7th and 8th graders can understand and appreciate and recognize the terrors that occurred. So that was the foundation for me, and I'm forever thankful for that. And then everything else I've been learning since has been supplemental.
You mentioned the Vikings and the Wilf family. For those who don't know, the Wilfs, their father, Mark and Ziggy Wilf's father, and the family are Holocaust survivors. They are the family are patrons of the U.S. Museum as well as Yad Vashem in Israel. Working, being the Vikings kicker, obviously, you don't necessarily pick your team for the owners, but is that important to you at all? Did that factor in at all when the Vikings reached out to you?
Well, I learned about it a bit later.
Oh, okay.
I knew they were, I knew they were Jewish, as they probably heard I was, but no, I wanted to come to Minnesota to kick, to help, and I'm glad they wanted me. I learned about it, and I learned about it later. I know, they were big, reasons why there's Yad Vashem in Israel. And so, for that and what their family has gone through and how they have represented the Jewish community and helped the Jewish community, they'll forever have my utmost respect, because I think what they've done for Jews, and for Holocaust remembrance is amazing. And like I said, they have my utmost respect as a family for everything they've been through and everything they do to help out, not just the Jewish community, but the community of Minnesota, a plethora of communities in totality.
The Vikings have done. I mean, I got to talk to a few of the four players that Mark Wilf brought a few years ago to the museum. I think they went to the Holocaust Museum, they went to the African American History Museum, and it was just such a cool experience. I mean, and this was pre George Floyd, so it was like, it just sort of shows the work that Mark. That it's important to Mark. It's important to know, like, that he's not just cutting checks to his players. It's important for him to know their experiences and where they come from, and it's important that they know his experiences and where he comes from.
And he's creating positive and educated influences in the community, which is amazing. Because
which is huge. I mean, that's so important that he's putting himself out there to do that. It's really, it means a lot to not just the Jewish community, but the community at large.
And, like I said, if I can help one person understand this better, or one person learn about it, that's all I need. Good enough for me. And so that's why I have the most respect for them, and talk to them every chance I get. And it's bigger than football, in a sense too, because this is life. And it's fun to be here and talk football and stuff, but the stuff they're doing and we were able to do on that trip was, in the midst of all that, football is sports is so small, because that became life or death really quick. The more we learn about it, the more we can see the signs, the more hopefully we can prevent it from ever happening again to any type of people.
Is it an opportunity to sort of, you get to teach them a bit about your background and your Judaism and where you come from, and an opportunity to learn about your teammates' backgrounds as well? Or does it not come up that way?
In light of everything that's happened in these past couple of years, it's probably come up a bit more, and we've had a bit of talks that have broken down some barriers, but it's something that I'll gladly talk about to them if they show interest or if they ask. I never try to press it on anyone, but now that more stuff is out there on social media and people keep up with each other on social media, you definitely get more questions about it. You're like, oh, what were you doing in DC? And that's my gateway, to tell them. And then, so definitely talks like that. And anyone who will listen, I'll sit there and talk with them, because the atrocities are real and it takes a lot. It's easy to just for people to say, oh, I learned about the Holocaust. I know, but for them to really wrap their head around the mass actions that were taking place, only 80 years ago. But there are some guys that want to learn, and I will always take the time to talk about them. And it doesn't have to be about that, it could be about anything and everything. But we do have good conversations, in the locker room or outside of football, if we're just hanging out with some guys, and try to take a piece from everyone, and learn from everyone as well.
I think people on the outside, I am a football fan, and I think people on the outside, you see players, you see them show up on Sundays, they play their game, and then sure, they practice during the week, but I don't think, a lot of people don't necessarily get a real perspective on sort of what the relationship is. I know people throw around terms like, brotherhood and what happens in the locker. I don't think people necessarily get what that means and how that sort of helps, facilitate, the team environment.
Yeah, I think maybe what sometimes people forget is that we're human at the end of the day. We're human. We are all of my friends in my life I was teammates with at one point, because I believe sports is the number one, or one of the top ways. I'm not going to say the number one of the top ways to bond people together, because friendship is kind of just, shared trauma in a sense, creates bonds that can't be forged anywhere else. So all my friends, were at one point teammates or opponents or something of the sort. We know what each other's going through. And yeah, like, kind of like we're talking about, we're humans, guys. Football is our job and we absolutely love it. And we're competitive individuals, but we're humans too. So we, guys like reading, guys like sciences, guys like art. Some guys, enjoy, studying to be CPAs, et cetera. There's so much more to it that people don't see. I love history. I love reading. I love history. I just try to, I'm on this quest of always wanting to learn, whether it's reading, talking to people, et cetera. And, kind of tying that into what you asked earlier about having my mom as an educator probably ties into that, and that's why I was so happy to be able to bring her on the trip. She loved it because she's been over on a couple of trips called the March of the Living, where you go, she's gone to Poland and Germany and then Israel, and you go through the camps with survivors. You go to memorials there, museums there, and then you spend the week in Israel, which is kind of like, the capstone of it all, the home of the Jewish people. And it's more of a happy week as opposed to the past week, which was, a bit more of a sad week, taking you through heavy places in Europe. So it's tied into that. And I was very, very glad to be able to share that time with her. And, just it was quality time with my mom at the end of the day.
She had mentioned, she is great. And if Alana, if you're listening to this, hello, it was wonderful meeting you at DC.
I'm sure she will.
Oh, I'm sure she will too. One of the things she had mentioned was that you were recently in Poland before the war started in Ukraine. So you weren't like that close to it, but you had recently gone over there. What was the, purpose for the trip?
Absolutely. So Andrew DePaula, our long snapper, had gone on the trip a couple years ago, and he introduced me to the woman who basically runs it all. So through the NFL, through a third party, they get NFL players to go on trips with Armed Forces Entertainment, I believe it's called. And we go, it's the whole point of the trip is to watch the Super Bowl with troops.
Okay.
But, so it leads up to that. That's the pinnacle. And then before then, though, so we went on February 1st, and I think the Super Bowl was the 13th or 14th, I believe.
That's about right. Yeah.
13th. So, for those 11, 12 days, we went there's 11 Army bases and 1 naval base in Poland. So we hit all the bases, most of the time hitting, 2 bases a day. And it was just to go and meet service members, hang out with them, talk to them, do Q&As, meet and greets, and just spend time with them and do activities with them. And it was absolutely amazing because I have the utmost respect and support for our troops anywhere in the world, because I try to live a life of service and they're doing it.
Yeah.
So it was an absolute blast to meet them and talk football with them, talk anything, talk military stuff with them, whatever they wanted to talk about. I was game. And so the perspective that trip gave me was awesome. I went all around Poland, and we watched the Super Bowl in Poznan with, the troops stationed there. And then after that, the trip ended, and I extended because I told myself I was not leaving Poland without driving up to Lithuania, because leading up to that trip, I did a lot of homework on where my family came from. And my grandparents both came from Lithuania. My grandma's side, or my grandpa's side, from Rakashik, and then my grandma's side from Panevėžys. So I drove up to Panevėžys. I didn't make it to Rakashik, but I drove up to Panevėžys, saw the Jewish history there, searched all the landmarks, got some help finding, the few people, or I mean, not few, but, a couple people that spoke English that helped lead me. And then drove over to Kaunas, which is rich in Jewish history and religious history as well. Spent some time there and then came back into Poland. So I wasn't letting myself leave Europe, without seeing where I'm from. And especially, getting to talk to my grandparents about it and what they can remember and what they can piece back from their parents. And then B, going to see Auschwitz. So on the last day before I was there, I drove, back down from Lithuania and stopped through Oswiecim, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's right next to Krakow.
Yeah.
And so, and then toured around Auschwitz, took a tour and went there into Auschwitz 1 and 2. And then after that, it was heavy, and I didn't know what to expect because I'd learned so much about one of the most evil places on earth where some of the worst atrocities ever took place. But after that, that day, and I took a breath and I was like, okay, like I'm ready to go home now. Like I'm ready to, get out of here. Plus, everything was getting a bit more riled up over in Ukraine with Russia and stuff. But no, that was important to me to see it, to go there, to see that part of history and be there and be a witness to one of the most evil places on earth. And as well as, throughout the trip, whenever we had a little downtime, like in Warsaw, there's a lot of rich Jewish history. It was, might have been the epicenter of the Jewish population in Europe, definitely in Poland. So going through Warsaw, seeing the last standing pre-war synagogue, all the memorials where the ghetto used to be, the Akapov Street Cemetery, which is overwhelming, with tombstones dating back hundreds of years, to in a predominantly Jewish cemetery. So stuff like that. I made sure I'm a fast traveler, and I try to do as much as I can in as little time as possible. So going throughout Poland was absolutely amazing. First of all, getting to meet all the troops and getting their perspective and learning and just hanging out with them and seeing how much we can actually impact their morale and, welfare and stuff, and them saying like, hey, I know you don't realize how much this did for us, but it meant so much that you would volunteer and come out on your own time to hang out with us. Was the coolest thing for me. It made the whole trip worth it. Whenever we heard that, and just getting different perspective on military life and how these kids, where these kids come from, why they enlisted, etc. And then getting to top that off with some familial history and Jewish history. It was an amazing trip.
You really did pack a lot into a very short period of time there.
Yeah. And, credit to the trip, went on because it was just like that where, we packed a lot into a little amount of time. But yeah, I move fast. I take in as much as I can, and I'll tell myself like, I'm gonna sleep, but I'll sleep when I'm back home too, because
that's right.
How often am I, gonna be in Poland? So when I'm there, I'm gonna do absolutely everything I can, and just take everything I can in, because I don't know when I'll be back. I'll definitely be back, whether it's to show my family some of the camps and some camps I didn't go to, and just take them through history. Because, the U.S., obviously the U.S. is getting older, but it's a relatively new country.
Yeah.
It goes back, 250 years now ish.
Close. Yeah.
Poland, there's records of, Jews in certain cities dating back to 900, right. So it's over 1,000 years old. There's a restaurant that we went past that's, I believe it was 1173. So it's the oldest restaurant in the world.
Wow. Fascinating.
11 or 1273, I believe. And just, stuff like that. Like the history is so rich there because people have been there for so long. And there's documents to kind of back it up, that I have such an appreciation, and everywhere you look, there was history, and that's right down my alley. Cause I was looking it up and like, oh, well, this place about, this thing about this place. And the group was like, all right, like enough, we get it.
So you are, being Jewish and being an NFL player, you are in a very select fraternity of people who are both of those things. What is, I mean, obviously being Jewish, you're a minority anyway, being Jewish in the NFL, even more. So what is it like, what is the experience of a Jewish NFLer like?
I wouldn't consider myself any different. I think I'm a normal guy. Who likes to work hard, who likes to bust his butt no matter what, who, and yes, my religion is different than most of the guys in the league, and it gets a little tough sometimes around the high holidays, around fasting or something like that. But I do what I can, and I, might modify it sometimes, but observe the holidays in the best way I can. And yeah, there's a couple of us in the NFL, and we talk, and the ones I've gotten to meet and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't feel any different, from the guys because I'm Jewish. I'm just a normal guy that is blessed enough to play in this league and busts his butt to play in this league. So yeah, it definitely makes it a minority number, but I work just as hard as any of the guys next to me, and our relationship is still strong and our bonds are still strong regardless of our religion, because it's such a respectful and home-like atmosphere where no one holds it against you, no one uses it against you, there's no negativity towards it. So yeah, I observe I observe it in my way, and that's kind of it. Everyone respects each other and each other's practices and each other's religion in this league, where it's never a crutch, only a step up.
Being, the somewhat transient lifestyle of an NFL player, you're splitting your time now between home in Florida and Minneapolis, or the Twin Cities area, at least when you're here for camp or throughout the season, of course. How have you found to integrate yourself with the Jewish communities of the places you've been so far? Because obviously, as you've talked about, that's a really important piece of who you are.
When the holidays were around, I would go to synagogue and just, stand in the back, say my prayers, mind my business. But I was also fortunate enough that, my mom, through the Chabad, you can, I guess, reach anyone in any city that's involved with the Chabad. So, she reached out via our Chabad back home, and, was able to get sufganiyot and a Hanukkah and candles, delivered basically to my door, to my apartment this past year. And then through that, they were generous enough to honor me by offering me to light the Hanukkah at a young professionals Jewish event. So that was awesome. Anything like that, I will gladly do, because as much as, other people in the community think I inspire them, they inspire me just as well. And in any way I possibly can, I'll help, and it's here in the community too. And it doesn't have to be within the Jewish community. I always try to take food, and give it to those in need, blankets as the winter comes around, clothes, socks. I know how important socks are in the homeless community. So anything like that I try to do. And then especially within the Jewish community, I gladly help out in any way I can, but it's also a lot of things I just do behind the scenes, just to be respectful to them, be respectful to myself, and stay true to myself.
We're going to talk much more about the Vikings and your life in athletics in general, but first a message from our sponsors, the Gold Group. With more people than ever working from home, one of the hottest trends in real estate is to purchase a second home and take advantage of the short-term rental market. Think about how much you spent per night the last time you rented an Airbnb. Now multiply that number by 30. If that owner rented their property for a full month, that's how much they'd collect from nice people like you. Aaron Goldstein, the owner of Gold Group Realty, is helping turn people who pay rent into owners collecting checks. If you've ever considered owning a rental property in Florida, now is the time, and he can help you crunch the numbers. Florida, because spring break doesn't have to end. Check out their website at thegold.group. So one of the, you're going to be starting your second year with the Vikings, but, one of the weird things, and, part of this probably, it's the nature of sports anyway, it can be very transient. And I think particularly of, a specialist who, you're, let me say this nicely, you're potentially more expendable than, say, the star quarterback is.
Okay.
This is going to be the first time in your career that you will have been in the same team 2 years in a row. Is that Like, that seems, I think, a little bit strange. Is that sort of a weird thing to try to wrap your head around?
No, because so I love being here.
Okay.
Hopefully they like me. And I am so excited because I think I did good things last year and I've only worked harder and I've only gotten better. So because that's at the end of the day, that's all I know. So yeah, I wouldn't change my journey for anything because it's brought me to some amazing places and helped me meet some amazing people and gain some awesome experience. And I'm so excited, and I'm not looking forward, like I'm not looking too far forward
Sure.
to season yet because there's still so much work to be done in order for me to be the best me for the Minnesota Vikings, this upcoming season. And it's all this work now. So for me to look past it, I'd feel like I'd be doing myself a disservice.
Fair. That's fair. And along the way, you did get to you played on your home state team with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Picked up a little jewelry a couple years ago,
Exactly.
which
So
is
it's
always
all part of the
fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so how many players, get to experience that? It's a minute fraction of NFL players that get to win a Super Bowl and get a ring, especially with Tom Brady.
Right.
So I don't take anything for granted. I take every experience in stride and try to use it to better myself as a man and as an athlete. And yeah, it's not a weird feeling because I want to be here. We have an awesome awesome group of guys, and I just can't wait to, help to continue to build their faith in me while, showing them that there's a reason that I'm here and I'm excited for it.
So the Vikings had one of the more watched coach searches this year. This
Mhm.
off season. How much do with Jim Harbaugh, obviously huge name at the University of Michigan? How much is that something that you as a player pay attention to, or do you just
Not much.
okay?
Because I control. So a lot of a lot of people don't ask me that, but they ask me about the past or anything like that, and I'm like, well, I control what I can control,
Right.
and it's the same thing there. Obviously, I can't control that, but I think by you saying that, it's such a respect to the guys in the locker room because the reason it was washed is because we have such an awesome locker room and so many talented guys in there.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I think about that.
It's one of those things I'm just always curious. I know as a sports fan, obviously the Vikings aren't my team of choice, but which we had talked about a couple weeks ago. I mentioned I'm a Detroit native and a Lions fan, but that's one of those not getting to sort of hear the athlete perspective on that of whether they're paying attention or they're reading the clippings just like we are, or if they don't really care and whoever gets hired and you'll go do your job no matter what.
Yeah, no, I think it's we might not watch it as closely, but we're excited to see who is going to be, joining our team, shortly after that.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, you don't watch it too closely because at the end of the day, it's out of your control, and you're just excited to get back there and go to work with your brothers anyway.
People see an NFL player and they're like, okay, this player has played football their entire lives from Pop Warner. They've dedicated themselves to it. And I found out that you didn't start playing until your senior year of high school.
Yeah, I was definitely late to the party.
Would you were a soccer player before that? What was it that got you on the gridiron?
So I've always been competitive. One of my buddies was kicking at the time. He was a year older than me, so they needed a kicker for next year. And it was as simple as the football coach coming up to me. I was one of the bigger soccer players, like, taller. And he was like, "Hey, how would you like to try kicking?" I was like, "Sure, cool." It's high school. You're malleable. Friday Night Lights. We had a good team. Competitive in states each and every year, and we won it the end of my junior year. So that compounded with the fact of I absolutely love soccer and it's my number one passion and it was my whole childhood, but maybe I just got tired of running.
Fair
Mm.
enough. So one season of high school football, and you get to go down the street to Florida Atlantic University.
Yeah. So
which is get to go play for your hometown school.
exactly.
Too.
It was, I had all these inclinations as a high school, like, oh, I want to go to the Carolinas for school. I want to, get out of Florida. I want to get away from home.
Sure.
But as I grew up, I realized, well, if you go to school here, you can be as far from home as you want or as close to home as you want, which is important to me. One of my core values is being close to my family and maintaining those relationships to the best of my ability. So yeah, I stayed at FAU, walked on because, I had a couple offers, but I chose to stay home and just wanted to, work and give myself the best opportunity possible. And yeah, it happened fast. I feel like I literally closed my eyes and now I'm here, but it was just me putting in the work. Cause I was very raw. I was strong, but I had a lot of work to do. And that was the journey of that was so exciting for me to get to this point. And there's still plenty of work for me to do, which I'm still excited about.
And that's the thing, like the technique is, I mean, it's not just kicking, right? It's the kicking of a soccer ball and the kicking of a football are so very, very different that obviously you're picking up this technique that others may have had years and years to learn.
Yeah, no, it's a work in progress. Obviously, in high school, it was not good. First couple of years in college, I look back and I'm like, whew. But back then, it was what I knew. It's
Right.
It's easy to say. It's easy to say if I knew then what I knew now, but that was the present time. And that was where I was at, and that was the work I put in. So there was one thing about me: I was never going to shy away from the work. So it was a fun journey. I'm so glad I stayed at FAU and I was able to earn a scholarship because that was my goal. And get myself, get that degree and then, get a master's and stuff like that while still playing. So it was an awesome journey and, forever thankful for it and wouldn't change a thing.
And as a kicker, as opposed to, unless you're Tom Brady, who's going to be playing forever, I'm convinced, you could play for another 10 or 15 years. Look at Adam Vinatieri, who I think retired at 45. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe even a bit older because I know he played.
Maybe even older.
I think he played 24 years.
You've barely even scratched the surface of your career potentially.
Yeah, you definitely can. And I think we're seeing guys go, later and later into their 30s or something because sports science has come so far and has allowed guys, different athletes' bodies to, maintain a high level of competitiveness for longer. So yeah, there's it's exciting. That's not why, I chose kicker. Obviously there are other reasons why, I chose it because it was the closest thing to my sport. It was probably the only thing I could do in football because I'd never played football. But yeah, it's we'll see. And but take it I take it a lot slower than that.
Although to hear your Jewish mother tell it, there was no way she was going to let you play any other position besides kicker. She wasn't going to let you put yourself in that kind of position.
Yeah, exactly. I knew that was coming as soon as I said it. I knew that was coming.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you can't blame her. You understand, where she's coming from a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tough sport with a lot of injuries, and and we were raised differently. In South Africa there was no football. It was cricket, rugby, soccer. I chose soccer. Played a little rugby and cricket as a kid, but nothing competitive. Just with friends. But soccer was it for me. So she wasn't used to watching that. The type of impact, consistent impact that happens in football. So it was a whole new world once I got to, high school, college, and they obviously didn't watch me,
right.
Consistently get hit or tackled or, whatever the case may be. Exactly. Yes, soccer was it for me. That was my passion.
Well, last couple questions, and we will let you go because I know you are up here for camp, and it's respect your downtime as little as it is. Last two questions we always end on. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Ooh, favorite Jewish holiday. Honestly, any of them that gets to bring together my family. Passover's coming up, so I'll get to see them then. And as I've gotten older, you realize you just get excited more so to, be around the table with your family, especially after COVID.
Yeah.
So as cheesy as it sounds, I don't necessarily have a favorite. Some of them are tough, especially because I'm away in a different city and etc. But any one of them where I get to spend time with my family, that's the real answer.
And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Favorite Jewish food. I don't know if anyone will ever touch or rival my grandma's matzo ball soup. So
you can't beat that. It's a classic.
It's a classic.
You can't go wrong with that.
There's probably only one answer, and that's my go-to.
I always, like, if somebody will just say matzo ball soup, I'll always ask whose, because A, I'm curious, and B, I want to see if they get really uncomfortable, like who they're going to offend, whether they're mother-in-laws or moms or grandmas. Nope. But this is easy.
It has the perfect amount of experience mixed with, just that grandma-ness, as well as good ingredients.
That is fantastic. Greg Joseph, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with this camp that is wrapping up, and best of luck into the season. We look forward to seeing you on Sundays very soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate you covering this because I think we both know how important it is. That and amazing it is that we got to go on this trip and the amazing individuals that went on it. So thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate it immensely.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.